How to keep and reproduce velvet worms, Onychophora. These ancient invertebrates have survived all mass extinctions and are rarely seen in the wild. In this video, I will provide you with the knowledge you need to establish and maintain a healthy and, hopefully, reproducing colony of velvet worms in captivity. I wrote the script for this video using recommendations by Jérémie, Ruban, and Mackenzie Harrison, and I am very thankful for their kind permission and assistance in producing the video. Keeping velvet worms in captivity presents unique challenges. These animals require very specific environmental conditions, and they are extremely sensitive to sudden changes and handling. If you only want to know the 3 basic things to keep them in terraria, they are simple. Faithfully reproduce in your terraria a little piece of ground and vegetation from their original habitat. Avoid any sudden changes in moisture and temperature, and do not touch them. If you need to move them around, provide a leaf on which they can walk by themselves, and once they are on it, move the leaf and allow them to slowly reach the new place. Let's start with the essential, the terrarium. Size matters, so make sure the enclosure is large enough for your animals, avoiding overcrowding, and made of non-toxic materials. Ventilation is also important to avoid the buildup of molds. But there is no need to have too much of it, as it can cause the substrate to dry. A key element is the substrate. Use a deep and moisture-retentive substrate, similar to the leaf litter of their natural environment. Good options are a mix of cocoa coir, peat moss, and finely shredded bark. Aim for a substrate depth of at least 5 to 10 centimeters. Make sure the substrate is always moist but never waterlogged. Mist it regularly with distilled or demineralized water. For safety, you can boil and rinse materials to kill fungi. Temperate mosses should be avoided as they tend to introduce unwanted guests like snails. Now let's talk about temperature and humidity. Velvet worms thrive in a stable temperature range, ideally between 18 to 24 degrees Celsius or 64 to 75 Fahrenheit. Avoid temperature fluctuations as they stress the animals. You can use a low-wattage heat mat or a small heater with a thermostat. The humidity must be high, around 80 to 95%. Use a hygrometer to monitor levels and mist regularly to keep things moist but not dripping wet. Remember, excessive moisture can cause fungal growth, which is fatal to velvet worms. It's important to note that velvet worms can drown. High levels of nitrites and nitrates, which are produced through natural biological cycles, can also burn their sensitive skin. Place several small shelters, such as pieces of bark, cork, or leaf litter inside the terrarium. If they cannot hide, they will soon die from stress-related problems. Feeding is another important aspect of velvet worm care. In nature, these animals are predators, so you can offer a variety of invertebrate prey, including crickets, springtails, fruit flies, earwigs, locusts, captive-bred house spiders, harvestmen, opiliones, flightless houseflies, small cockroaches, and isopods. To avoid residual pesticides or parasites, ensure all prey is captive-bred. Powdery blue isopods, Procellionoides pruinosus, are an excellent secondary prey option due to their soft exoskeletons, which allow for more complete consumption and their ease of culture. If not eaten, these isopods will act as temporary custodians, consuming mold and waste within the enclosure, and can serve as a supplemental food source between larger, periodic feedings. Rather than using live prey, which may be unethical in itself, use freshly killed prey that has been humanly euthanized by, for example, freezing it. This will prevent many problems, including contamination, reduced growth rates in the velvet worms, and injuries that may be caused when they fight with the prey. The size of the prey should match the size of the velvet worms. Use smaller prey for smaller species or babies. Start by offering small amounts every 2 to 3 days, or larger prey once a week. Always observe if the animals are feeding and adjust as needed. You may place a small dish of water for your animals. Never use tap water. Always use distilled or demineralized water to avoid any kind of chemical contamination. After the terrarium is set up and food is provided, regular observation is very important. Note their behavior, feeding, molting, and overall health. If a problem or change is identified, take the necessary steps to correct it. Onychophorans desiccate easily, so they only become active when it is dark or at least humidity is high, so they can be stimulated by light rainfalls or foggy conditions and low light levels. In a terrarium, this can be replicated with a light mist and low light levels. They will retreat if disturbed by bright lighting. When at rest, they typically squeeze into tight spaces under moss or wood and are often found in small social groups. They cannot dig their own burrows but will utilize small hollows within the substrate. Over time, as the substrate shifts or the velvet worms flex their bodies, the size of these cracks can increase, creating an extensive network of cavities where individuals may sequester themselves. During the day and evening, they can often be observed against the glass in a dark corner, below the substrate surface. They grow by shedding their skin, similar to snakes. In the days leading up to a molt, they may appear alarming as they become less active and a white, reflective layer with a soft texture covers their skin. This should not be mistaken for a fungal infection. During the molt, they will become reclusive but may shed in the open by hanging onto a plant or piece of wood. The shed skin, which takes several hours to be fully discarded, will resemble a tan or white ball of soft viscous fluid and should not be confused with mold or an open wound. After shedding, they will typically retreat for several days to recover. Disturbing them during this process may result in an interrupted molt, excessive stress, and potentially death. Stressed, sick, or dying velvet worms will slowly become more lethargic and develop patches of discolored skin that appear wet to the touch. Portions of their body may become less responsive. Antennae may not fully extend or appear glued together. Various legs may stop reacting, and parts of their body may become sunken and immobile. These individuals should be isolated in a sterile container with moistened paper towel, use distilled water, and kept in a warm, dark space. While many ailments are deadly, quick action may result in a full recovery. If all individuals in a colony simultaneously react in a similar way, it may be due to excessive bacteria buildup, non-visible fungal blooms, or imbalanced soil chemistry. In these cases, the substrate should be changed immediately. Regular maintenance is necessary for long-term success. It is important to replace the substrate every few months or once a year. Apparently, some mites are harmless, but still keep an eye on them. Keep detailed records of the animal's behavior, feeding, molting, breeding, and any other issues you may encounter. Do make videos of any mating activity, egg laying, or births, depending on the species, as well as of any interactions among individual velvet worms. And never forget to keep backup colonies. Pathogens, especially molds and slime outbreaks, can decimate colonies of velvet worms in captivity, and keeping multiple backup colonies is the best way to protect this important work. Breeding Onychophora can be challenging. Pay close attention to mating behaviors and signs of reproduction. The babies may first feed from the glue the mother uses to hold the prey. As the babies grow, they will start feeding directly from the same prey the mother eats. Juvenile care requires a similar setup as the adults, with special attention to prey size and humidity. Important: remember, if for any reason you release onychophorans into the wild, do it exactly where you collected them. This is to prevent spreading diseases, altering delicate local environments, and falsifying future research on their genetics, biogeography, evolution, and conservation. By keeping them in captivity, you have the opportunity to record new observations for most species, as much of their biology is still unknown. Remember, keeping these incredible animals is a long-term commitment that requires dedication, patience, and ethical concern. If you cannot provide this, please do not start. The 3 key rules. Reproduce in your terrarium a small piece of ground and vegetation from their original habitat. Avoid any sudden changes in moisture and temperature, and do not handle them, as their stress can cause disease and death.
Thanks for watching this velvet worm rearing guide. If you're passionate about these amazing creatures, please subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss future updates. We post new videos occasionally.